They did the crime, but what should be required as they do their time?
Making pennies on the hour, you can't do it. It's impossible.
But if inmates aren't helping out in the jails, how much will it cost taxpayers to pick up the slack?
Put our morals before the desire to exploit individuals.
We're digging into the finances and our values as voters decide whether to ban forced labor at California prisons and jails.
Why did the state legislature put this on the ballot? What's this all about? What is involuntary servitude anyway?
We'll hear from both sides on the debates over Prop 6.
This is CBS News Bay Area with Elizabeth Cook.
I'm Makovec in for Liz, and it's something you might not think about if you or someone you love has not spent time in prison or jail. But it is a moral question now in front of California voters. Should people who are incarcerated be forced to work for pennies an hour? And is there a better way for them to do their time without it costing taxpayers any more than we're already shelling out? Well, Election Day is just 3 weeks today to go, and today we are focusing on a proposition that affects prisoners right now. They can be forced to do labor when they're in prison or jail, but Prop 6 would put a stop to that. Our Lauren Toms breaks down exactly what's at stake.
Every day, Lawrence Cox proudly wears this pin that says all of us or none.
It's inclusivity. It means everybody. No matter what your race is, we are all capable of being impacted.
For Lawrence, that impact is through the justice system. After spending 17 years in prison, he now wears it as a symbol of his fight to end forced labor as a criminal penalty, as he helps to write a ballot measure that may outlaw that practice for prisoners.
Making, $22 a month for working all day just about sometimes. I have those experiences in my mind. I understood what it meant not to have my own autonomy. I understood what it meant to be forced to work.
California outlawed slavery in 1850 in its first state constitution, but it held on to a clause that is still in effect 174 years later. It allows for prisons to demand inmates to work various jobs. And Lawrence says his experience working in his prison's kitchen and as a janitor was not effective in his own journey of rehabilitation.
It's so cold to where all the water that falls is already turned into icicles leaning on the roof from the dock, as you know, that we work at. And I remember almost having frostbite because we have to constantly go in and outside to unload and load trucks.
According to the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, inmates earn anywhere from 16 cents per hour for basic labor to $10.24 per day for inmates who work as firefighters. But Lawrence says these wages, even at the highest levels, are not enough to provide an inmate with enough money upon release or to sustain their needs from within prison.
It's hard on people's families when they're incarcerated. It costs. It costs. It really does. It costs. So being able to take some of that burden off of my family would have been excellent. But making pennies on the hour, you can't do that. It's impossible.
Critics of the ballot measure say work inside a prison is all part of an inmate's need to repay their debt to society and set some up for life outside of prison walls. But so far, no money has been spent opposing the ballot measure. Even so, a new study from the Nonpartisan Public Policy Institute of California shows that half of likely voters are estimated to vote no on the measure. And study author Mark Baldessari says a lack of knowledge of the proposition often leads voters to default to a no vote.
There isn't a D or an R next to it. There's a yes or a no. I think there was more of a sense of why did the state legislature put this on the ballot? What's this all about? What is involuntary servitude anyway?
But Lawrence argues providing inmates with the choice to work or dignified pay would do more to improve public safety and reduce the potential to reoffend.
I think it's an excellent opportunity for us as a state, as a society, as a people, as constituents, to step up and put our morals before profit and gain. Put our morals before the desire to exploit individuals.
Hoping to pave a new path of prioritizing rehabilitation.
Well, like Lauren mentioned, no argument against Proposition 6 was submitted, but some Republican lawmakers did vote against it. The state Senate actually rejected a similar proposal 2 years ago. The governor's administration said the measure could cost taxpayers billions of dollars if the state had to pay minimum wage to prisoners. This year's proposal includes a voluntary work program as a way to get around that issue. Our conversation on Prop 6 continues after the break. When we come back, we're talking live with opponents who say it is all about money and enforcing a ban will cost us all. And later, we're going to ask supporters why they think it is worth it. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We are continuing our conversation on California's Prop 6. The measure would ban forced labor in the state prisons and jails. Joining me now to talk about it is Susan Shelly with the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. Thanks for being with us, Susan. You think voters should say no. Why?
Because when this was in the legislature, the Senate Appropriations Committee pointed out that by removing this language from the Constitution and removing a law that's on the books separately in a different piece of companion legislation, it opens the possibility that courts will order California to pay minimum wage to incarcerated persons who work. And that would cost, according to the Senate Appropriations Committee, billions of dollars a year, not just for the state, but for the counties as well, because this affects jails.
So
and
it
I
would
don't think the
open
voters know that.
up that possibility, but it would not make that certain. And then they're saying that this voluntary work program is a way to get around that.
Well, it might get around it at the state level, but there's still a possibility that the federal courts would say California has to pay the federal minimum wage. And as you mentioned earlier, the governor did veto similar legislation that would have raised wages for inmates. He vetoed that 2 years ago, saying this should go through the budget process because we have to look at exactly what this would cost. So for it or against it, we should have an honest accounting of what the likelihood is of litigation resulting in billions of dollars of additional costs.
Yeah, there are a lot of questions right now about the cost. The latest from the Nonpartisan Legislative Analyst Office says that the costs are, quote, uncertain. And basically what you're saying, it would depend on how this is all implemented. So your concerns about the questions out there, it's not necessarily the ban in general. It's about how this could be interpreted in the future in different municipalities.
Right. If you take this language out of the Constitution and you repeal the provision in state law that requires incarcerated persons to work, previous court decisions that said the state doesn't have to pay minimum wage fall away. And then we don't know what the outcome will be financially.
Okay, so if we could boil this down and take that out of it, say there is going to be no minimum wage situation, would you still be against the ban if it would be a voluntary work or a small amount of pay that's not full on California's minimum wage?
Well, the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association is concerned about the impact on taxpayers, both at the state and county level. So it's hypothetical to say there wouldn't be any impact. Right now, about a third of state prisoners work at jobs that help to run the facility. If they didn't have to work as part of their sentence, then the state would have to either pay them more to work or bring in outside labor to do those jobs. That would have an impact on taxpayers. There's no way around it.
A lot of uncertainties there. You know, some people say this is a moral issue, though. We just can't have, forced servitude. What do you say to that argument?
Well, it's as part of a sentence for crime. It's not forced labor on people who have not been sentenced to prison. It's part of a sentence. It's part of rehabilitation to do work in while incarcerated, and that has not been held to be unreasonable in the past.
All right, Susan Shelly with the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. We really appreciate your perspective on this. We're going to hear from a supporter of Prop 6 when we come back. Welcome back to our conversation. It continues now on Prop 6. The measure would ban forced labor in California prisons and jails. And joining me now is Esteban Nunes from the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. Thanks for being with us today, Esteban. We appreciate your perspective. Talking about this ban coming about during the movement for reparations. Why should people vote yes?
There's two real reasons. One, of course, there's a moral obligation. How can we as Californians say that institutional racism doesn't exist, when a form of slavery lives and breathes in the document that is supposed to embody our principles as a state. And then two, this prioritizes rehabilitation before forced labor. So it shifts the focus away from forced labor, which really enables incarcerated individuals to participate in programs like educational programs, vocational training programs, therapy, and other rehabilitative programs like Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, which have proven to reduce recidivism.
I think for some voters, it's hard to, say, sympathize with people who are in jail and prison because they say, you know, you did the crime, you're doing the time. Why shouldn't work be part of their punishment?
I think if our goal really is to enhance public safety, we want to ensure that folks that do go to prison are able to take full responsibility and accountability for their actions. And the real way by doing that is to have a deepened understanding of what brought you into prison in the first place. Everybody is different. And that really, and being able to heal from the trauma that really influenced those poor decisions. And that really comes from being able to take part in rehabilitative programming and developing emotional awareness and intelligence. So that way we're ensuring folks coming home are not recidivating.
Well, couldn't work be a part of that? Doesn't that teach responsibility, showing up somewhere on time, doing things right?
Absolutely. And Prop 6 does not eliminate work by any means. It just makes it voluntary. So as it currently stands, work takes precedence over even visiting with family, over therapy, over educational programs, over rehabilitative programs. And by lifting the forced labor aspect, we're not saying nobody inside should work. It's quite the contrary. We're just saying that folks should also be able to participate in these other rehabilitative programs. So they're able to deal with the underlying condition of what influenced their poor decision making in the first place.
Now, there is some concern about the cost. We've been talking about that with our prior guests because there's a lot of unknowns on exactly how this would be implemented across different, perhaps, counties or parts of the state. And if the system had to end up paying people to do some of the work, if enough prisoners did not volunteer to do it themselves, how much that would cost taxpayers. Is that something that you're concerned at all about?
No, so there's two reasons why. One, we had a companion piece of legislation which essentially acts as the implementation mechanism for if and when Prop 6 is passed, which would keep the status quo for wages. And then two, there's been a number of different states that have passed this and have not seen anything of the sort. And most recently in 2022, 4 states like Alabama, Oregon, Tennessee, and Vermont passed this and have not seen this vacancy of work. People want to work inside. They want to maximize their time while they're in there. Like I said, this really is just about removing the forced labor aspect so folks can really prioritize their rehabilitation.
All right, Esteban Nunes with the Yes on 6 campaign. Really appreciate your perspective.
Thank you so much.
And there is a program, by the way, that really has become a win-win for many inmates in California that helps them become full-fledged firefighters once they've done their time. Washington Ridge Camp is one of the many conservation camps across the state. Some inmates convicted of nonviolent crimes are allowed to live here and learn the ropes as firefighters, joining CAL FIRE on the front lines of wildfires when they need a boost.
Every man deserves a chance to be able to better himself, to better his life, to be able to want to come to places like this and excel in their life.
In 2020, Governor Newsom signed a law to allow people who participated in these fire camps to have their records expunged so that they can become full-time firefighters once they get out of jail. Thanks for watching. You can always get all the latest headlines and weather over on KPIX Plus. And remember to like and click the button on the bottom left of your screen to subscribe for the biggest Bay Area news.